evening and welcome to the Press Box. My name is Christine Hill, and for the next 30 minutes I'll be your host. With me tonight are Jay Marcks and Ty Reynolds. How are you guys tonight?
Doing good.
Good. I'd like to remind the viewers and callers that it is a live show, so if you'd like to call in with any questions or comments, the number is 873-6713. Let's start off with college football. What do you think Georgia's chances are for beating the Auburn streak?
Well, slim and none, basically. This Georgia team has shown that maybe if you're a one-dimensional football team, like the Clemson game, they can stop you. But this year, Auburn has, during the middle of the season, Patrick Nix has really started to generate a passing offense for Terry Bowden and Auburn down there on the plain. They had a very impressive win at Mississippi State. East Carolina came into Auburn with the emphasis of stopping the run, Jay, and that just made a highlight film for Frank Sanders for the NFL scouts. Frank Sanders is, I think, the best receiver in the Southeastern Conference, and there's a lot of great receivers in that league, but I think Sanders may be just the best out of all of them. I really think that Auburn's going to own possession of the clock in this game. I think they'll own the ball 35, 37 minutes, and it'll just be a typical Auburn game where they just grind it out at you, and if you come up and try and stop the run, Patrick Nix and Frank Sanders in that passing offense, they're going to be good enough to keep you honest on defense, and if you're not, they're going to make you pay. I think that Auburn should win this game by 10.
Yeah, I definitely think Auburn will win the game. I think that they'll run it more. They got that big number 28.
Davis.
Yeah.
The big kid out of Spartanburg.
He's a good running back, and if they're smart, that's what they'll do. They'll run the ball more. Like you mentioned Sanders, he's a great receiver, but I think that Georgia plays the pass better than it does the run. So if Auburn's smart, they'll just come to play running game and just slam it down their throat. However, when Georgia has the ball, this is an interesting matchup here because Georgia obviously has Zaire, Heisman Trophy candidate, and he's great with the passing attack. And Auburn's strength, I think, on defense is their pass defense. And then their secondary is unreal. They've turned a couple games around in this streak. And, that's where you really, as a Georgia fan, want to watch the game. You want to see Zaire attack the Auburn pass defense. But when Auburn gets the ball, I'm afraid it's going to be the same whole thing. Marion Campbell crying on the sideline while Auburn racks up the rushing yard.
Where do you think Georgia should improve on their playing?
I think the key areas for Georgia to make improvements for the future here is that they need to recruit defensive linemen. They've got one of the worst defensive lines in the conference, if not the worst. The Vanderbilt game showed that. Also, their kickoffs are very weak, Jay. Every time you see Cannon Parkman or one of those guys kicking off, the ball lands on the 20-yard line, and it doesn't go high. And Georgia needs a running back. They have got a very suspect running game. We talked about this on the show last week, where we're not recruiting Mo Williams out of Columbus really hurt this program. Georgia just hasn't been able to recruit a big-time running back for the past couple of years, and it really shows. Georgia has become one-dimensional with the pass, and they're very easy to predict. I think that's why you've seen a lot of Eric Zires throwing interceptions here.
They've had a little bad luck, though, in Georgia's defense. I know Ty likes to get on them. But they've had a little bad luck with the guy from Lovett leaving to play baseball and a couple of injuries in the backfield and having to move a quarterback. I think who's going to play quarterback next year for him, I'm not sure.
It may be.
They had to move him to the tailback. So, their running game has been a little unlucky. But, yeah, they are one-dimensional, and that's why I think Eric Zire is even better than people think because they're one-dimensional, he gets the job done anyway. It's almost like saying, here, we're going to pass every down, and yet he's still successful. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I can see that. Going back to this Auburn club, I think another great strength that they have is their defensive line. I think Gary Walker, a junior college transfer out of Livonia, Georgia, has been a big plus for them. I think Etheridge, the defensive end on the left side, really ran a clinic against Florida down there. He's got so much foot speed and ran around those big old tackles down there at Gainesville, and that was a key for Auburn winning down there in Florida, were those four-down defensive linemen. As a matter of fact, in that game, Jay, they were able to take out a linebacker and put in Fred Smith right away. Florida tried to run the ball at him, and still those four defensive linemen stopped the run. Yeah. I think Auburn's just got dynamite defensive linemen. Pat Dye did not leave Terry Bowden empty-handed. And like you said, the strength of the secondary, when you can bring in Fred Smith, Jay, as a nickel bag, Fred Smith can start for just about anybody in the country. And here he is. He has to sit on the bench at Auburn. They have a lot of good football players.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see how they play Zaire, whether they go after him or just lay back into coverage and try to pick him off like they do other teams in the SEC.
Okay. Well, switching over to Tech there, I know they're still searching for their first ACC win. What are the chances?
And they're searching for a coach, too. Tonight, as everyone knows, the resignation of Bill Lewis, and
He's already resigned?
yeah,
Oh.
yeah.
Well,
he's,
then it would be my bet that he's not going to be there next year.
no, I don't think so. But now here it is.
And you heard it here first on last week's show.
Here it is. You've got O'Leary who's going to take over the job, or at least I think he is. And are they going to give him the last 3 games and then make another decision, or are they going to let him go ahead and coach next season? If they're serious about O'Leary being a coach, you got to give him next season at least, and let him see what he can do. He's probably going to keep a lot of the assistants around, maybe all of them that he can, so at least he's going to have that consistency. But if I were Georgia Tech, what I would look at doing here is the coaching job at Tech is a stepping stone, I think. I mean, Bobby Ross has a great year in 1990 there, and then runs off to the pros. I think that anyone who does a good job at Tech is going to be offered a job at another program and will leave. Georgia Tech is a basketball school. I think what you have to do is that you have to get a head coach, and then you have to tell him that in a couple of years you can become head coach and athletic director. You want to do something to make your head coach stay. There have been situations like out in Wyoming where for years they've had good coaches out there leave, like Pat Dye, because that was a stepping stone. So several years back, their athletic director just said, well, I'm going to be the head coach because I'm tired of being used as a stepping stone. I think Georgia Tech needs to take that approach.
That's a good point. They as far as the end of the season, though, I think a good point needs to be made here about the last 3 games. Chances are Tech probably will lose the last 3 games of the year anyway.
No, I think they'll beat Wake Forest.
So they might, but that's going to be a coin toss type of game, Ty. I mean, both teams are in the same boat, and that is the seller of the ACC. But if you let the interim coach, like if you're going to give the job to O'Leary and you let him come on and coach for the last 3 games, and they lose all 3 games, he's going to start off on the wrong foot next year, okay? Whereas if you just say he might not be the coach, we're going to play out the string, and then give him the team in the offseason, he starts fresh, and you want to give him a chance to be successful, and I think that giving him the job for the last 3 games is a mistake. This is Lewis's fiasco, and they should let him go down with the ship, I guess, and all the other rats have jumped off, right, Ty?
Well, I think if you're going to make a change, you need to make it as soon as possible once you make that decision. As for this game coming up with Clemson, this is going to be a tough assignment for Tech now because Clemson had a big win on the road versus a top 25 team at Chapel Hill. They just absolutely shut down the run of and the attack of Johnson & Johnson. And Clemson has got really good athletes, and they've been playing a lot of young players. When you play a lot of freshmen and sophomores, you're going to see a lot of improvement towards the end of the year. Tech traditionally plays Clemson pretty tough over there, but now with the recent changes, with the head coach, and then also you've had this little bit of a quarterback controversy this year, and also the possibility of Luganville still being hampered by an injury that he sustained against Florida State, it might be a tough day for Tech. Although if Luganville were healthy, I really think that they would match up well because he's been throwing consistently for over 300 yards a game when they let him loose, Jay. And you can against a team like Clemson who doesn't score a whole lot of points, that gives you a chance. But here, if he's hurt, it might be a long day. Also, Georgia Tech gives up too many yards to opponents running the football, and I think Clemson is just going to run the football right at them all day.
That could be the case. I think they'll try to control it. You make a good point about Luganville. He got the crap beat out of him in the Florida State game, and I tend to think that he probably, even if he comes back and plays, he won't be 100%. They absolutely need him and to get the passing game clicking, and if they have any shot at beating Clemson, but like I've already said, they're not going to win the last 3 games. They're destined to just sink, and that's why I think that if they're going to do an interim coach thing, they shouldn't hire the guy they're going to give the reins to next year.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, how about Nebraska? They still have the inside track for the national title?
Yeah, I think so. And with the close game that Penn State had over the weekend, I just knew that the pollsters and all the voters were going to come out and say, Big Ten, screw you. This is what you get for coming out and not breaking up that Rose Bowl game, and you're taking a national contender here. You're keeping them out of the coalition. I think that's one reason Nebraska last week topped the polls in 2 out of the 3 polls here. Yeah, I think Nebraska's got the inside track, and certainly if they win at Norman and then go down into Miami and play probably Miami in the Orange Bowl, I think they'll be voted number one, without a doubt.
Well, Ty brings up a good point about the pollsters. Here you have a system that is, I guess, all wrong. I don't know how else to put it. They're voting for the wrong reason. Nebraska, like Ty said, does have the inside track at the national championship, but that's because they play weaker opponents. The Big 8 doesn't have the teams that the Big 10 has. So consequently, Nebraska can roll up these big scores, and all the people that vote in the polls go, hey, Nebraska's better than Penn State because they're winning by a larger margin. Well, they don't take into consideration the fact that Iowa State and Kansas and all these teams, they're lousy. Whereas Penn State's having to play a Big Ten schedule, and it's true that because of they're locked into the Rose Bowl, a lot of the people in the Bowl Coalition poll or whatever aren't going to vote for them. But see, they're having to play a team like Indiana now. You know, they've been in and out of the top 25, but now they go to Illinois, which is a far superior defense than I think they've ever faced this year. And they're playing each week. They're playing a team that probably won't beat them, but has a chance to. You know what I'm saying? And so the game's going to be closer. I guarantee you Penn State will probably beat this Illinois team, but they'll beat them like 17-3 or 17-10, something like that. And all the people are voting go, oh, well, Penn State, they didn't score 60 points, so I'm not voting for them. Where it's the other way around. When you think about reality is that Penn State's playing a tougher schedule, playing a tough game, and winning, whereas Nebraska, they have a cakewalk. They waltz through it, and they get more votes in the polls because of that. It's kind of convoluted, but, you know, that's the way the system we have. And so Ty's right. I think Nebraska does have the inside track now at the national championship.
I don't know. First of all, I'm going to disagree with one thing. I don't know if the Big 8 is that weak of a conference. They're going to have at least 3 out of 8 are going to be in bowl games, and maybe 4 out of 8 teams are going to be in bowl games. That's a pretty good ratio.
Well, 5 out of 10 in the Big 10 will be in bowl games, and they are every year.
Well, you forgot, Jay, there's 11.
Oh, okay, but still, even the marginal teams, we've talked about this before,
My
the
point
marginal
is
teams
that
that
the
don't
Big 8
make
is
bowl
not
games.
that bad.
Well, they are. I think Georgia Tech, here's a good example. Georgia Tech, probably the worst team we've seen around in Atlanta for a long time. They can beat Iowa State. Come on, Todd.
Well, anyone can beat Iowa State.
Yeah. Well, they're in the Big 8.
They're not going to win a football game this
The
year.
Big 10 had Northwestern for years, okay? But now Northwestern's starting to beat teams that, you know, they normally look sick against. And I think when your lowest team, or the worst team in your conference, has a record of like 5-5-1 or something like that, that shows you that your conference isn't that weak. Whereas traditionally the Big 8 has a couple of teams that are 1-7 or 2-6, stuff like that. They're awful. The Big 8's awful. They only have Nebraska. Used to have Oklahoma until they really got screwed by a coach leaving there on probation, and Colorado. Okay, so those are the only 3 teams. Kansas State's had a good quarterback the last couple of years, so they've been competitive.
I think Kansas State's a pretty good team.
Yeah, but they're competitive.
So you've mentioned 4 bowl teams.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Well, can we switch over to
Yeah.
NFL?
Sure. You can do whatever you
Well,
want.
we'd like to mention that the Monday Night Clash, sponsored at Dirty Al's, New York versus Dallas.
Well, here it is. Dallas, I think, is developing into, well, actually, Jay, I think they're just meeting expectations here as being one of the superior teams in the league. Here it is. They're only giving up something like 14 points a game. If they don't have one of the top, maybe they do have the top defense in the NFL. Dallas, to me, you just don't see too many weaknesses on this team. As for the Giants, they're on a 5-game losing streak, and I think that there's a little bit of animosity there. There's talk about Dan Reeves not being able to get along with the general manager there now. Dallas, they lost last time on Monday Night Football. I don't see them doing it 2 times in a row. I like Dallas to win this football game by 10.
Yeah, Dallas is definitely a favorite. We should talk a little bit about Dirty Owls here because we went over there to watch a big rivalry last week, and I'll tell you, you know me, I go there, Ty, for the cold beer and the good service, but they got good food over there, too. I didn't realize that until I hung around for the whole game, but the owner of Dirty Owls is a huge New York Giants fan, so he probably won't
So you
like
want to go over there and give him a hard time.
Yeah, the Dallas Cowboys are playing his beloved Giants, but you're right about their defense. We talked about this for 2 years on this show. In the NFL, defense wins championships, and offense, sells tickets or something like that. And Dallas, for the last couple of years, has had a great defense. And even though it's been weakened by free agency, they don't have the depth they used to have, Ty, but they're still a good defense. So I have a feeling they'll shut down the Giants. The Giants, don't get me wrong, have a good defense too, but I can't see this Brown guy they have at quarterback and Meggett and Hampton moving the ball with any consistency on the Cowboys. I mean, the Giants are going to have a turnover or two or a key special teams play to get even in the game, much less win it. So it looks like Dallas all the way tonight, and everyone can join us at Dirty Owls to watch this clash.
Okay, we do have a first phone call of the evening. Thanks for calling. You're on the air.
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, I want to talk about probably one of the worst coaches in the NFL, Wayne Fonts. He went out, and during the offseason, he said that they went through all the old tapes and all the tapes of all these great, quarterbacks in the NFL and everything, and said that Scott Mitchell was the man. Remember they gave the guy, $5 million signing bonus stuff?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, if Wayne Fonts still has his job after this year, I mean, it was a brutal error because Scott Mitchell is a terrible, terrible quarterback. And I think anybody that watched that game the other night, all they've been talking about is how bad the guy's been all year. I mean, did you watch that Packer game?
Yes, we did.
Yeah, and Mitchell's atrocious. I mean, why? How does Wayne Fonts, a guy like him, still keep his job when he makes drastically terrible moves like that?
Because in the past he's hired assistants like Dan Henning he could blame, and so that's what happened last year. He fired Henning in the middle of the season and said it was his fault. And you're right, this year they lumped a lot of not only money but hopes on Mitchell. They didn't really have him scoped out because he'd only played, 5 games? But they still have Barry Sanders and a good defense. So I'll tell you how Wayne Fonts saves his job is he's 4-5 now. He finishes 9-7 at the end of the year and goes to the playoffs as a wild card. He's got something to throw on the contract table. That's what's been happening with Fonts. He is a bad coach, but his team wins in spite of him and gets them to the playoffs, and then, sure enough, he's back next year screwing up again.
Yeah, well, the only reason his team wins is because of one guy who wears number 20, Barry Sanders. He's being, they wasted him in the run and shoot for a couple of years. I mean, the guy should be running for 2,500 yards. They should just gear the offense like he ran at Oklahoma State. They stuck a big fullback in front of him and never gave the guy the ball and gave Barry Sanders the ball 35, 40 times a game. And the guy's unbelievable.
Yeah, he's a great running back. I think that's the best running back in the NFL without a doubt. I mean, you can talk about Emmitt Smith, but you got to realize that he's on the best team in the NFL. I agree with you. I think Barry Sanders is the best running back.
Yeah.
What do you think about the Cleveland Browns' chances this year? Because a lot of Cleveland fans, I hear after this one game, they're talking about how much better Mark Rippon's going to be than Vinny Testaverde. And both of them are kind of like the worst of two evils.
Right. That's a good point, I think. As far as quarterbacks go, Rippon probably was a little bit better than Testaverde. But when you think about the playoffs, neither one of those guys are going anywhere in the playoffs. Cleveland's defense will probably get them the division title or into the playoffs, but they won't go any farther than the first round. I don't see Cleveland's offense moving the ball on anybody with a major league caliber type defense. The 8 or 10 teams, or however many, make the playoffs. All those teams will probably have great defenses. The Browns are going to have to be able to move the ball. Neither Rippon or Testaverde will move the ball. They got Metcalf. A similar instance to what you pointed out with Sanders, they don't give Metcalf the ball. I've watched the Browns play a couple times. They just don't give Metcalf the ball like the Lions don't use Sanders correctly. You got a weapon like that, you got to use it. Both teams, marginal playoff teams, if they get there, they won't go past the first round.
Yeah, well, I mean, the way you look at it this year in the NFL, I mean, it's kind of disappointing, too, because you got the San Diego Chargers, who is a great team. They got beat by the Falcons. You got Cleveland throwing Rippon and Testaverde out there each week, and you got the Dolphins that do the last-second field goal to beat Indianapolis. Looks like it's going to be a pretty ugly Super Bowl with Dallas beating the living daylights out of anybody from the AFC again this year.
I agree with that. Unless something happens down at Miami where they have just a big change with their defense all of a sudden, where they could all of a sudden start stopping people and then having Dan Marino. But I agree with that. I don't think the AFC does have a dominant team over there. As for Cleveland, I think they're benefiting from a very weak division this year, even though I think that Cleveland and Pittsburgh are going to both be in the playoffs this year.
Yeah, and both because of their defenses. We can't stress that enough. Pittsburgh's defense is just as good as Cleveland's. But when you watch O'Donnell play, I mean, he's worse than Testaverde and Rippon. This guy, when is the last time he's gone back into the pocket with confidence and thrown a complete pass? I don't know. He's hurt now, so I don't know what the Steelers are going to do. But that's a good point that caller Anti made about the AFC. They're a bunch of also-rans, and the real Super Bowl is going to be whoever comes out of the NFC playoffs. And I'm not ready to write Dallas in just yet. I don't think they have the depth they used to have, like I pointed out earlier on the show. And I think that in the course of a 16-game schedule and then the playoffs, they get a couple guys hurt. They already have their best offensive lineman hurt, and we'll see how that affects them both tonight and next week against the 49ers. I think that Dallas is going to come up against it here in the next couple of weeks. They got to have the best offensive line and defensive linemen to dominate like they did in the last 2 years. They don't have that this year, so we'll see if their skilled players can carry them.
I think another key in this game is that last year Jimmy Johnson guaranteed a victory, and the reason I think he did that was because San Francisco didn't have the speed and the play at linebacker to keep up with the running backs coming out of the backfield to catch passes by Troy Aikman. And you saw the changes that San Francisco made this year, going out and getting Plummer and Ricky Jackson and players like that, people who can help cover these receivers, or rather running backs coming out of the backfield. I think San Francisco made that adjustment for that game alone because they know that Dallas is going to be there next year. Anyone can figure that out. So I agree with that, Jay. I think that the two best teams right now are San Francisco and Dallas.
And in the past couple of years, I think San Francisco's put too much into the regular season matchup, and they are again this year. They're talking, they beat the Redskins, but in the locker room, all the talk was about the Cowboy game next week, how they wanted to see how they measured up. They wanted to see how the defensive changes you alluded to would pay off. Okay, well, they can put all the stock they want in this regular season game, and if they beat the Cowboys next week, that's all great. But that'll give the Cowboys, I guess, more fuel for the fire when they play in the playoffs. So they can't really stress how important a regular season win is. If both teams are going to the playoffs, the only thing that matters is what happens in the playoffs.
Okay. Well, how about our own Atlanta Falcons? Are they still in the picture for a wild card?
Well, sure they are, but they're in a stretch of a tough part of their schedule. Coming out there and getting a win against San Diego yesterday was great, but San Diego's quarterback was hurt, and I think that made a lot of difference in the football game. Also, San Diego is a type of team that kicks a lot of field goals, which tells me that when they're inside the 20, they can't put it in. The Falcons did a good job with their defense, but I thought what really helped win this game was special teams, and Alexander punting the ball down there, keeping them bottled up inside their 20 for doing that to them several times in the game and making San Diego drop most of the field. I think that was a big key in the game. San Diego did move the ball some. They averaged 4 yards a carry on that defense and got 21 first downs to Atlanta's 11. So it was definitely special teams and defense that won that game for them yesterday. But they're in a stretch right now where you got to go on the road, you got to play at New Orleans, and then you got to play at Denver, where they already showed that they lost there in the preseason. Then they come home for a game against Philadelphia, who I think is going to finish second to Dallas in the NFC East. And then you got to go back on the road again and play San Francisco. I think that that's a possibility where the Falcons could lose 3 out of 4 or maybe all 4 of those football games.
That's true. It is a tough schedule right now for the Falcons. But you have to admit, Ty, both you and I pegged that game wrong. We thought San Diego was going to come in here and just shove them around and easily win the game, and the defense stepped up big. And you got to give them credit. They might do that against New Orleans. What if they step up big and hold New Orleans to 3 field goals? Then they win that game. And if they, like I said at the beginning of the year, they've already swept the Rams. If they can sweep the Saints, they will go to the playoffs as a wild card team.
Well, I like the change that they made going back to a 4-3 and putting the 4-2-5 on the shelf for a little while. But here it is. You were doing that against San Diego, a team that's going to run the football. You knew that they were going to run the football simply because their quarterback was hurt. I don't know if they're going to be able to get away with that against some of these teams that they're going to be playing in the next 4 weeks.
Okay, but that's a good point. They need to do the same thing against the Saints. The Saints are going to come out and run the ball. They got Jim Everett. He's not known for his expertise at passing the ball. He's an adequate quarterback, but the Saints, in order to win, are going to have to control the ball on the ground, just like San Diego did. And if the defense steps up, stops the run, you're right about the 4-2-5. If they scrap it for the next couple of weeks, they may have a chance to step up big here.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt right there. We do have another phone call. Caller, you're on the air.
Yeah, how you guys doing?
Good.
Just wanted to ask the guys a question. Miami in the Bowl Coalition poll with 1 loss and 1 impressive victory is ranked ahead of Alabama, who's undefeated. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think Alabama has a chance to prove themselves. I think if Alabama goes out and beats a top 25 team at Mississippi State on the road, and if they go out and play Auburn and beat Auburn in Birmingham, they're going to be in the championship game in Atlanta, probably against Florida. If they go out there and beat Florida as well, that means that they will have beaten 2 top 5, maybe 2 top 10 teams just depending on if Florida beats Florida State. Will depend if they're top 10 or top 5. But if they go out there and they do that, there's no doubt in my mind Alabama's going to leapfrog Miami. But, I mean, those are 3 tough games.
Right now, I think that Alabama's behind Miami because of their weak schedule at the beginning of the year. Also think that we touched on the fact how fickle the polls are and how it's an inadequate system. But in this case, the Bowl Coalition poll is rigged to try and get 2 good teams into a bowl game to decide the national title. And I think that's part of what's going on here. Voters are moving Miami up in the polls because they foresee a matchup with Nebraska here. If Miami had another loss, like if they got to play Florida State yet, and I don't know, it may work against the voters here in the Bowl Coalition poll to rank Miami that high. I see your point about Alabama being undefeated, but they haven't really played anybody yet. Like Ty said, they got a game with Auburn and then the SEC championship game, and that's when voters will be able to see how to rank Alabama. Right now, I think there's a little question mark there, how to rank Alabama. They're undefeated, they haven't played anybody. What do you do?
I think Alabama probably likes the position where they're at because they know if they win those games, I don't think there's any doubt in their mind that they know they're going to leapfrog these people. This team is very similar to the 1992 team where they just sputtered along during the season, and Stallings just had them do whatever they needed to do. He won with his defense and his kicking game, and when his offense needed to come out and show it, they showed it. And they showed it against Miami a couple of years ago in the Sugar Bowl. Although I tell you what, Miami's a good football club. This team's got 2 quality wins. Going up there and winning at Syracuse in the Dome with 50,000 of those crazy people is a tough place to win. It's tough to audibilize up there. And also the win against Florida State at home, that's a great win. Florida State's a good football team also. I think Florida State may end up in the top 5 at the end of the year.
Okay. I'd like to remind everyone right now the phone number is 873-6713. If you do have any questions, just give us a call. Right now we're just halfway point between the season. You mentioned a lot of good teams. Who do you think is the most dominant right now?
I think we hit on that earlier with one of the previous callers. I don't see anyone in the AFC, but I really like Dallas and San Francisco. I think that they're going to meet in the playoffs, and to me, I think that's going to be the Super Bowl right there.
Yeah, I think the top 4 teams in NFC are probably the best 4 teams in NFL. You got to throw Minnesota and Philadelphia. I think they've proved by being 7-2 that they're, I think, at least on par with San Francisco and Dallas. It remains to be seen how they fare when they play each other. But right now, you can just see how the AFC is going to be a big jumbled mess, and the NFC is going to have four of the best teams in the NFL.
Okay. Well, that's all the time we have for tonight. I'd like to thank Jay and Ty for being here tonight. And thanks to all the viewers and callers, and we'll see you here next Monday, 8 o'clock. Good night.